Welcome back to another episode of the Block Runner Podcast. I'm your host, William, always here with your co-host, Iman.
What's going on, dude?
And on the sticks, we got TJ.
Hello.
And joining us today, finally, we got Bitgod on the deck. Appreciate you for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for having me on the podcast. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So we've been avid followers of your Twitter account, and you've been spitting hot fire every 30 minutes or so on Twitter.
Yeah, it was definitely very like when we first got into the Ordinals space. It was I think much needed confirmation or validation that there's a lot of interest and a lot of passion behind what's happening here,
Totally.
right? And a lot of that was coming definitely from you and your community and stuff. And I think we're very experienced, I guess, and when it comes to finding new things that emerge in this Web3 industry.
Yeah,
and it's always like the community / the passion and the vibe and the energy
that brings us in.
That gets us like
interested.
stuck into something, right? So
Yeah.
a few years ago, it was the whole
Totally.
metaverse thing. We felt the passion there, the metaverse NFT space, and then now it feels like it's all on Bitcoin, and it feels like you have a huge part in that. So if you can give us like a rundown of like your background, your story, like who is Bitgod? How did you even get
Totally.
that name, dude? Like you're the lord of Bitcoin. Right?
No, I think some background. Right? I think now been in just in and around, I guess, the crypto space the past 8 years or so. Right as I was really graduating high school, would go off to college and still just be in it. I think losing mostly a lot of money, but I think as time went on, was really just focused on working. Trying to build little companies here and there at that time, in 2016, 2017, was really focused on reselling sneakers and a number of those sort of types of little gigs, and had a blast, living rooms just full of shoes and StockX and all that sort of stuff. Had a blast. And I think as time went on, started to just get deeper and deeper into crypto, and, ultimately wanted to pursue this as probably my, sort of full-time job in some capacity. And so I think as I was getting closer and closer to graduation, really wanted to of course work full-time and started really my first, I guess, really startup, right? Which was a centralized exchange, with, sort of a few other people. And that had some early traction, but ultimately I think really failed. I think that there was a lot of, interesting sort of learnings, I guess, from that specific company. And there was no, sort of deposits or withdrawals or anything like that. And ultimately got to a point where it was I was footing the bill for the entire company and just could not sort of continue that, especially during that time as well. COVID had started. And honestly, the focus was more so on DeFi summer, right?
Okay.
It was the 2020 summer
Yeah.
of DeFi. And so centralized exchanges were still there, but everyone was trying to farm, different sort of food tokens, of course.
Yeah.
Post that, right, as I sort of shut that down, would then get a job at a decentralized exchange. Really enjoyed that. From there so that was sort of 2021. The majority of 2021 worked there. 2022 wanted to break into the venture side of things, and eventually did with a company called newness. And worked there for a bit, trying to invest in a number of different ecosystems.
Yeah, we're familiar with newness Capital.
Yeah,
they're cool.
Yeah. No, amazing people, and I had a blast really working there. I think one of the things with that experience as well, was in 2022, pre Luna crash. That was sort of the stuff I love, right? It was deals every other day, right? It was you're doing a couple deals a week or something like that, and it was exhilarating. But post Luna crash, everything slowed down dramatically, right? I think in May or it was April or May of 2022. Basically, after that, it was very few companies were raising. The companies that were, it was clear that there was nothing. So it sort of slowed down a bit, and decided to ultimately sort of leave from there. And I think decided to pursue some stuff on the NFT marketplace side as well, and just continue to get more and more experience. And I think that really brings us to more recent, right? I think back in, I want to say it was March of this year, right, of 2023, was when I saw Ordinals launch on the timeline. really mainly Magic Eden. I saw them launch on Ordinals on the time, I think it was just like March 20th or so.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is sort of interesting. Went to the website and, it sort of recommended Xverse. As soon as I saw those two experiences sort of coupled, I was like, oh, there's definitely something here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I really set up this account, and it was not focused on really building anything. I was just honestly looking to have fun, collect some stuff, shit post. I think that you look at those early posts and it's like, very lax. There is no sort of like focus or anything. It's just like, let's just have some fun here. So that was, I guess that's sort of the backstory. And I think maybe, I guess the backstory behind the name, I think I was just looking for like something short. So, and had seen some other like accounts like named God in the past, like DeFi God and some others that I had followed. Yeah. I think that just sort of came up. It stuck, and I'm like, screw it, let's do it.
Yeah. So
I think in the early days I switched between a couple names, right? It's like Ordgod or Ordinals God and Bitgod. So yeah, and I think it's just sort of stuck.
Yeah, I think on Twitter you also explained that that you had a ton of attempts on Twitter to like create like a massive following, and I think one of your recommendations was just to just post anything and everything and you see what sticks. Is that
yeah, so I think like you look at my history, and it's not just Twitter. Like I'm very much someone that can't just sort of like read a book and I learn. Like I need to fall on my face like multiple times in order to really learn something. And like I don't even know if this is around anymore, but like I've tried to do like 3 or 4 different podcasts as well, right? Like, and they failed, right? Like no viewers on Twitch and stuff like that. And I've ended up like sort of packing up shop. And so like the same thing with Twitter, right? Where like I've tried to gain a following, and whether there's just like there's no interest, there's the strategy is wrong, whatever the hell it is, right? Is I've tried it before, right? And so yeah, I mean that's the way. But yeah, no, I think to your question specifically, that's my sort of thoughts on this stuff. I think a lot of people get in their head too much about like, well, like it doesn't sound right, I need to fix this up, and it's just like you just need to get stuff out there. And I think over time you start to learn more and more about like maybe what people like, what people don't like. And that's how I like to build, I think, sort of, strategy as well as just sort of like learn from what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's a lot like the strategy of like MVP, minimum viable product. Yeah. It's like build something quickly, get it out there, get it tested, get some feedback, and then just kind of iterate from there. And that's a lot.
I think that was, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that your story is sort of very similar to ours. Like, when we started the podcast, we weren't necessarily had a goal of any kind. It was just Iman and I just talking about crypto and
stuff that we just found interesting, right?
Yeah, and we were, I guess personally for me, I was just trying to break into the industry because my background is in engineering, and it's just not as interesting as crypto. And so I needed to figure out a way to like get into the industry somehow. So, I liked starting a podcast. And
I didn't even know that, dude. I thought we were just having fun.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that we were trying to break in, but thankfully you had that back end agenda, because we definitely broke in one way or another, because it's important just to, because I mean, and I think the most important thing obviously is consistency too.
Yeah,
which is something we've maintained for a long time now, and it's tough because these things, especially in this market where you have these up and down cycles where things are going like amazing, then like within a year or two,
it's like trash.
You're questioning your sanity all over again. It's like wow, is all this just
fake news?
Something I don't know, especially when you get into like these super niche like realms that we find ourselves in. Like we got involved in the metaverse sector before Facebook and Meta was even a thing.
Yeah.
So we really weren't sure if there's any future in this, if anybody else agreed with us. Same with NFTs.
Yeah, we were questioning our own sanity several times on the podcast.
Yeah, it's like exactly. So it feels like we're kind of in the same spot again with Ordinals and Bitcoin, but not really.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit more obvious this time around when you kind of like analyze the landscape of what's happening in Web3 and the macro situation, everything. It almost feels like a perfect alignment of events to cater to this new narrative, right? So I guess, give us your thoughts on that, dude. Like, okay, you generate a lot of traction socially with the Bitgod persona, brand, whatever it is. Is that what it is, since you like kind of hit lightning in a bottle with the Bitgod? Is that what you, that actualization of your identity? Is that what kind of like kept you focused on the ordinal space and its growth, or is it just like the innate, I guess, value potential of ordinals in Bitcoin, separate of what the Bitgod brand represents? Like, or is it just a combination of it all?
I mean, honestly, it has nothing to do with myself, right? I think that, like, even the OHP team, like, I've made $0 on that, and the rest of the team as well. Like, I think, like, this has all been and everything I've done so far and want to continue to do in the future is really for ordinals, or more so for Bitcoin. I think for the first time in my life, like, I feel like I can actually, of course, it's still going to be difficult. Of course, it's still going to be competitive, whatever. But I think this is the first time in my life where I'm like, you can actually sort of try and set up and really build for the long term. I think that seeing what I've seen so far across these different ecosystems, especially being on the investing side, is like, you really don't know, right, as a builder, if that L1 you're building on is going to be around in the next, like, 2 years, like, especially 5 years, right? Like, it seems like gargantuan. And so I think that this is the first time where I'm like, okay, like, you don't have to worry about the underlying L1. Maybe you have to worry about, some of the culture, the politics between, Bitcoin Maxis and the ordinals builders or whatever. But, like, that's something I feel like I can much more deal with, than like the underlying chain just dying and not having any traction. So I don't know. I think it has nothing to do with myself. I think it has everything to do with, with Bitcoin, with ordinals, with, the team, and making sure that, we're sort of doing right by whatever product we're building, right? I think for now on the quadrillion side, right, is doing right by the artists and that whole experience. So yeah, it has really nothing to do with myself. I think that I just see like marketing and and strategy and all that sort of stuff, I think just in a different way than some of the other people, some of the other companies, I think on ordinals, right? Like, and of course you see that in how things, I think, really develop. On my page, as well as the others that I'm focused on. So yeah, I think that's my answer to that.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think you're right in addressing, like, the underlying opportunity of I guess it's like a collective understanding, all of us who are, like, involved in contributing to, like, the infrastructure of this whole Bitcoin thing. Because I think a lot of us are seasoned veterans. We've seen these these manias come and go, and these new sectors emerge from Web3 on other L1s, like you're saying. A lot of it, of course, originating from Ethereum, and a lot of it, copycat attempts for other competing L1s, or
and from the marketing perspective too. It's like the reason why we liked Bitmap a lot was partly not because of its sort of genius, but also it's like it's the metaverse on Bitcoin. Yeah. Right. That narrative is more than enough to get anyone excited who doesn't really, understand, like, how Bitcoin works or understand the metaverse. But you put those two things together, everybody's heard of the metaverse, everybody's heard of Bitcoin. Put them together, it's like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you can apply that same logic to basically anything. Yeah. Anything on Bitcoin. It's
like pictures on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Pictures, music.
Yeah.
Anything you could think of. So unlocking that, I guess, that new paradigm, right, is the collective mission I think we're all on.
Yeah. Did you know that we're more than just a YouTube channel? We also built Mscribe, the first inscription platform built from the ground up for the metaverse on Bitcoin. Connect your Bitmap ordinals and use our tools to bring your community into the virtual realm. Support us by joining the movement at mscribe.io. Like, comment, and subscribe for the latest alpha. Back to the video.
So what do you think, as far as, because you entered around March? That's basically when we went all in ourselves around the launch of BRC20s. Like, we saw the traction that generated. We watched it balloon from like a 20 million market cap space to 1 billion in like a few weeks. That was enough for us to be like, okay, yeah, there's something happening here.
Yeah.
That we can't take our eyes off of, right? So give us, I guess, take us back to that time whenever you were seeing BRC20s. Like, you took a huge, I guess, risk or gamble, just like throwing a token out there, or maybe you didn't see it as that. Like, what was the motivation behind 0xBT and the intentions behind what it is you want to create with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe unlike I'm like you guys, I wasn't there right during the mint of Ordi, right? Like I think that was what, March 9th or so.
Mm-hmm.
I think I really believe I'd have to go back for sure to confirm, but I'm pretty sure my first day was March 20th. Whenever Magic Eden sort of officially launched, I think that was when I entered Ordinals, and honestly didn't know anything about BRC20s at that time. I think as time progressed, there was like, I think this time in like late April to, so about a month or two later, to like early, I guess, yeah, like late April to early May, where there was just this like lull period, right? Where we even saw this sort of over the summer, where it was like there wasn't really much minting, right, on the JPEG side. I think volumes were maybe steadily increasing, but not, sort of too crazy. And I think that as time progressed, I think like many others started to mint as many tickers as possible on the BRC20 side, right?
Mm-hmm.
In like that late April time, I think like so many others were doing. It was just fun, right? It was different, and like I hadn't seen personally like this meta of like a free mint, really ever, and so I was like, this is really interesting, and I think from there started to really build a thesis around like, all right, if I do this sort of token first, sort of bootstrap the community, and then from there go into what is ultimately next, which is it was always going to be something art focused. That was, I think, always sort of clear to me, not sort of a game or not anything DeFi related, etc. Then I think that there's sort of an avenue to try this out, and I think that that was the thesis. I think that there's been a number of things that I would say like confirm that, as well as like some interesting ideas to the contrary. So yeah, that was my background or sort of history to, I think, BRC20s, and then I think really the thesis to why I decided to launch OXBT.
Yeah, I remember that when we first saw BRC20s, it was like really hard to understand. It's like, why is everyone getting excited over these like JSON like inputs into Bitcoin? And and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, it just ballooned to like $1 billion. I was like, well, what is happening?
Yeah.
And so now like we have like these different competing fungible standards. Like, what's your take on that? Or Bitgod, do you recommend like following like I guess the general consensus, or like where the masses are, where the liquidity is, or does it make sense to go after tokens that have like development, infrastructure, functionality, potential?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of thoughts here. One I would say is if you go back to before I even started teasing anything or really even doing anything on the OXBT side, I remember there was a short period, right, of like basically the time between Ordi, just being, I think, really mainly traded via OTC / I think Unisat had maybe just launched their marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And Ordi, of course, being listed as the first BRC20 on a centralized exchange. There was like 4 or 5 different competing standards that came out in that 1 or 2 week period. Like SRC20, ORC20, I forget about, I think there was about XRC, right?
Stamps.
A bunch of stuff came out in between there. And my ultimate thoughts and thesis then was like, I think the most valuable will of course recruit where there is social consensus or, ultimately the most liquidity. And that was still BRC20, right? And of course, post Ordi getting listed on an exchange, to me, it was like, okay, like this is probably solidified as the standard, right? At least for now, or at least in the short term. I think as time has progressed, of course, like different standards have now come out. I think with some updates, right? You got like ORC Cash and ORC20. With Sonic, who I've chatted with extensively, you have Track, and you have Benny, who I've chatted also extensively with. And then of course you have more recently, of course, Runes, right, from Casey. I think that it's caused really maybe not so much Track and ORC, but definitely Runes has caused a lot of confusion, and I think the OXBT community, right, and confusion and really chaos, and like, all right, are we going to move to this standard? Are we staying here? Like, what are we going to do? And so we actually announced. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but we announced, I think, 1 or 2 weeks ago, like as sort of the OXPT sort of side of things, we're actually going to be moving away from that entirely, at least for now, right? In sort of post the mint of perpetuals, which I assume we'll probably get into soon. We'll be moving to sort of like an access pass, right? An Ordinals access pass to the quadrillion ecosystem, right? And so that'll be a reclaim, right? The only way to get that path will be via OXPT. But this specific, conversation and confusion around BRC20s or runes has honestly just caused a lot of chaos, I think, in the community. And I'm all for competing standards. I'm all for pushing the boundaries. I think maybe it's just been like the way the rollout or announcements have been around runes has caused the most confusion, right? Maybe if there was some some serious comms around it, etc. I've talked extensively with this topic with the IRL Alpha crew and more. But that's our sort of thoughts right now. I assume though, in the longer term, now going to sort of my future thoughts, one standard will probably win. I think it just, and I don't know if that's runes or BRC20, or maybe it's something that hasn't even been launched yet, but that's my general thesis around these token standards, is both on the non-fungible side as well as the fungible side. There's typically one that's utilized most, right? You can have a bunch more, but where the most of the liquidity and value accrues is usually one standard. And I assume that is probably 6 months to a year out, maybe less, but that's my current thesis. And so maybe it is in the future that we revert to sort of airdropping or something in the future with a BRC20 or rune. But I think for now, the sort of entity that is providing the main utility to OXPT like needs to continue to push forward without or sort of with as little chaos or confusion as possible. That's the way we look at it.
Yeah, it's really tough because if you're retail or you're just like an investor, it's hard to pick one because of so many standards, and you want to pick the right one where the liquidity is. But as a builder, it's even more complex because even though the liquidity might be in BRC20, it's not really great for programming, right? Some functionality, right? So it's
I mean, it's been so difficult, right? And I think like you've seen over the past like 6 months, right, since OXPT was really sort of minted, or I think maybe a little bit less than that. Like there hasn't really been that much developed, and like we can't use it as a payment mechanism, right. and there's so many different hurdles, that I think have sort of stood in the way, and hoping that this is the right move for the long term. So yeah, agree with you there.
Did you know that we're more than just a YouTube channel?
We also built MetaZone, the first app store for the metaverse.
Buy, sell, and explore a new class of digital assets like our flagship game, Rovi.ai.
Support us by collecting your digital assets through MetaZone at metazone.io.
Like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated.
Back to the video.
Yeah, so yeah, you said you were moving away from OXPT. So what exactly are you moving towards?
Yeah, it's going to be a sort of Ordinals access pass that you'll exchange or sort of swap, right, your OXPT for. And that'll be, of course, access to what Quadrillion is working on, the sort of main entity, providing utility to OXPT. Okay,
I gotcha. Yeah, because we're seeing a lot of access passes from different entities and all that. So I'm curious, like, why the access pass? Does it I guess enable some sort of functionality that the original BRC20 token couldn't, or is it just like better for marketing? Is like what's the angle?
Well, no, I think the angle there is really a couple things, right? One is I think moving away from the BRC20 and standard in general will, I think, cause less confusion.
Okay.
Two is really the I think the potential collectability of it. I think that there's a number of different ways we've been sort of like testing and modeling that I think would be really cool with the Ordinals access pass, with recursion in general, that we haven't necessarily seen before, right? I know we've seen a ton of like proof collective pass and whatever on ETH, but I think that there's a lot of cool or interesting ways you can get creative with an access pass on Ordinals specifically. Yeah. So that of course relates to the brand and all that sort of stuff. So that's really my answer to that.
Yeah, it makes sense because BRC20 is a little bit more restrictive. So having
totally.
that flexibility is going to be important if you're cultivating a community.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I guess like also, yeah, while there's so much chaos and confusion amongst like the fungible token ecosystem, it kind of does make sense strategically, just kind of like sideline ourselves a little bit until like all this like, contention kind of resolves itself. So that way, you know, as a community, yeah, there's more consensus and a little bit more of like a cohesive direction, because it definitely felt like that early on. Like it felt like we were full steam ahead. We all knew what to do.
Yeah,
we're all contributing to build like in a very, you know, singular direction. Then all of a sudden, there's like 10 paths we can all take. And we discuss this daily. Is like, dude, we want to do so much, but you know, there's a lot of different options and, you know, different variable outcomes from what it is we decide to build. But you know, we don't necessarily know where the market, that invisible hand, that force that dictates whether or not things will succeed or not. Well, they'll agree with us, right?
So, Bitgod, are you sort of hoping that the fungible standard that gets liquidity also has the development, like infrastructure and capability there, or does it really matter?
Totally. I mean, I think totally, right? I think the thing I was mentioning a second ago, right? It's like it's been 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that. I think, you know, Domo and others maybe on the BRC20 side, right, had no clue it would take off, right?
Yeah.
And there was not, you know, anything set up to properly help improve that, etc. And I talked to Domo extensively as well at Bitcoin Amsterdam, and I have a lot of respect for him and everything that the L1F is now doing. But yeah, I mean, I think like even when Runes launches, like what infrastructure will really be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe Ordinals wallet and maybe Unisat will instantly support it, but like then it'll still take months for, you know, let's see a swap, let's see a marketplace. Like it's still going to take a lot of time to build infrastructure or get to a place where it makes sense for everyone, right? Not just us as like a company or us as builders, but you know, the end user to seamlessly be able to purchase or either buy or sell. You know, to send, whatever it is, right? And even like, how do we know Runes is going to interact with wallets, right? Like that took a while for Xverse and others to, you know, implement properly BRC20 functionality in the wallets. Like, how will we be able to see this stuff in our wallet? So I just think it's going to take, and it always takes longer, right? I think anything on the engineering side, right, always takes longer than previously estimated. So I just think like whenever Runes does launch, which I think is what, a couple months or supposedly a couple months from now, it's still going to take a while to build out the proper infrastructure that makes the most sense for everyone. So I'm hoping it happens and happens quickly, but understand also the reality of like developing on Bitcoin. It's not the easiest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, trying to figure out which one is going to kind of win out is going to be basically like gambling, and you don't want to gamble your developer time on a gamble, right? You want to be sure to make sure that, you know, you're not wasting any resources.
Yeah, but at some point, somebody has to take that gamble, right? Because again, a market has to form around something.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was going to say. Track Benny, Benny,
exactly.
our Lord, was an inside joke, by the way, but Benny, he's building a pipe, and pipe has more functionality right off the bat than the standard Runes.
It's an improvement on what it is KC's. It's again a hybrid approach, right? Bringing what we all love about BRC20 to what it is being proposed with Runes, and we're seeing like a vibrant community emerge from that. We're getting constant pressure from them, like, hey guys, talk more about what's happening here. Build on pipe, build for pipe, all this stuff. Tap tap tap, right? So these are all the things that typically like that draw our attention, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think of the potential of that? Like, have you looked into that ecosystem at all?
I'm particularly bullish on Betty, as well as Santiago, right? I think at Hodling. He's here in Orange County as well, and we got to meet. I think maybe it's been like a full month now or so ago, and I know he's building Tap Exchange. Right. So I'm particularly bullish on Benny. I've talked to him a lot, and I think what they're doing is credible. And honestly, I've just been really mentioning only BRC20 and Runes the past like 5 to 10 minutes, but it could be that pipe and what Benny works on is the actual winner. And so like I think only time will tell, right? I think like time and money will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember we were having a conversation with Josh and Randy from Ordinals Wallet, and
Yep.
I think from their perspective, they're sort of waiting on like what Casey does and just support whatever Casey does. So I wonder if
Yeah.
like Casey has that gravitational pull where it's pretty much what he says goes in terms of like where the liquidity, the gravity of the liquidity goes.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if like that's going to be the case or not.
Or at least like because liquidity follows, I guess, what developers end up the provisioning, right?
Yeah.
So it's really it starts with the devs.
yeah,
And yeah, so like because in the beginning of Runes, you know, the Ordinals Wallet guys, they were ready to kind of like put out their own interpretation of this
Right.
before Casey kind of like re-stepped in, right? So
like 12 hours.
Well, I
later.
think it's just
yeah,
I think it's just people projecting, right? Like, and this isn't a dig at Benny, right? But like you have the comparison here, right? You have of course Casey, right, and then you have Benny, right, who I think are both very capable developers, capable people, right, smart people. But you have, of course, Casey on this side that's proven, right, with the Ordinals protocol that has generated this 35 million plus inscriptions, like over $500 million in sort of secondary volumes, etc. And then you have Benny, right, which maybe he's built a protocol like that in the past, like we just don't know. But like I think you get what I'm saying, in that like consumers are just projecting, like, hey, like Casey's done this in the past. I think Benny's cool and really really smart. But I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, that's not what ultimately makes a product win, right? It's not like consumers thinking that like something is cooler or something has more promise. It's ultimately, I think, what makes the most sense, right? I think that the builder is building on top of that sort of protocol or that ecosystem, etc. So if Benny can,
You're right, Bitgod. I mean, we sort of see the parallels of like the construction of the internet with all of crypto. And when the internet was being built, it didn't necessarily use the best protocols to build it.
Yeah.
Right. Someone
exactly.
essentially dictated the protocols and everyone just followed suit. So even if Casey's implementation of a fungible token isn't as good as Benny's, for example, it might still win out because of its gravitational pull, even though Benny's implementation is just way better for developers. So it's really going to depend. And it sucks for us because we're builders and I don't like waiting around. And this is the worst part.
Yeah, I mean that's our exact point as well. Like it's like I hate being in this limbo period of confusion, of chaos. Like it just doesn't make much sense, right? And so like if you can remove that independency or dependency or externality, then it's probably best in the short term.
Yeah, I wonder if it makes sense to like support everything and then just like deprecate things as people just like, forget about it.
That's true. I think you definitely could, right? Like you definitely could have a pipe token, right? You could have a rune token, a BRC20, probably all at the same time. I think the biggest problem is like how that would look operationally. Right. There would probably be different prices for all of them, different holders for all of them. Right. It wouldn't be like 1-to-1. And then you have to think about like how the community, is around that. And like, does Matrika, right, support all of those token gating features. Right. And like so many different operational sort of things there that might just be a total nightmare. Honestly.
Yeah. When you were mentioning that, I mean, I don't know if you've heard this thing called DMT, digital matter theory. We've been
I don't think so.
We've been talking about this here for a couple of months now, but it is just a name that we gave the thing that humans have been doing for like 100,000 years. It's just recognizing patterns. And and you were talking about having several tokens being supported, and what this is really like we're trying to figure out why bitmaps was so instantly valuable to us. And it was because Blockimoto figured out, he recognized a pattern of Bitcoin's blockchain being the blocks being districts and the transactions being parcels. And so it really went back to like the value came from the underlying source data, which is Bitcoin data. And so digital matter theory is just applying that source data to a fungible token or a non-fungible token. So what that would look like is if you find a pattern on Bitcoin's blockchain, let's say you take a transaction hash, and in that transaction hash, you find 4 A's in a row. And it's like, okay, how many times does 4 A's occur on a transaction hash in all of Bitcoin's history? And for now, just for the sake of conversation, it comes up 10 million times. So now you've come up with a method to generate either a fungible token or a non-fungible token based off of Bitcoin's data. And I think through this non-arbitrary token mechanism, we can generate these tokens using any of the standards that exist. And so there lies the problem. It's like, well, which standard? Are we going to be using BRC20s? Is it going to be runes or whatever? And so, but nonetheless, like this methodology applies to any fungible token. So if there's like a community following, BRC20s, it can generate non-arbitrary tokens using this method using BRC20. And then another community in the runes, they could do the exact same thing, create runes based off of data of Bitcoin's blockchain. And I think what this does is the entire history of crypto has been arbitrary. It's like, why 21 million for Bitcoin, right? Why do we have like these, like just an arbitrary selection of max counts, right? And so with this non-arbitrary method, we're able to use Bitcoin's block data, find a pattern that sort of fits with what you're trying to do, and then just create some sort of a narrative that's like this token exists based off of this non-arbitrary pattern that exists on Bitcoin's blockchain. So we think this could be like a new sort of angle that people can leverage on creating tokens that are non-arbitrary, and it's like something new.
I mean, I I think something else as well too is that I just chatted with his name, I believe LH from Saturn. I don't know if you've seen Saturn at all.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure actually how much I don't know how much he wants me to divulge, but like I think you maybe seen some stuff on Twitter with like Chartfu, right? And maybe from LH as well, talking about basically sat ranges being fungible tokens as well, which brings up a whole nother standard for the potential. And so like I think that's also very interesting. And then like we talk about this DMP piece or DMT piece, like you look at what that can also do and hasn't been done, right? Which is like, as soon as I got back from Amsterdam, I got really deep into building a thesis around like why rare sats or just like uncommon sats specifically could be really interesting to collect. And like, no one has taken that specifically and like gated a community with it, right? Like, you own 5 uncommons, you're now part of the uncommon club or something, right? So there's still so much to be really explored. And again, like it's all going to take time, right? And who really knows if the sat ranges is actually going to be the winning standard over runes or not. But like, there's so many different people experimenting on I think exactly what you're talking about, right? This DMT
100%
theory.
Yeah, Casey Rodemer was the first one to really apply this, right? This whole sequencing thing of all Satoshis, right? And then Blockimoto, and then we have rare sats. Like these are all like identifying patterns within the Bitcoin's blockchain that you can attribute value to.
Correct.
And so this methodology just allows anybody to discover a pattern and then create a token of some kind.
Yeah, the more we talk about this stuff, it definitely feels like we're honing in on like this is the newness factor that because we're seeing a lot of this like discussion happening on Twitter now. Like it's like bullish sentiment is kind of re-entering the space. It's like because of the whole ETF speculation and stuff. So it's like, all right, now we're all bullish, right, guys? So what is it we're bullish about? Right. Like we take ourselves back 4 years ago. We had NFTs, we had DeFi that was newly emerging, we had the metaverse sector that was like emerging. GameFi, there was so much like newness in the space, right? There's a lot to kind of like gravitate towards. Now, relocate to your current time positioning. In the time future. Continuum. And it kind of feels like we're regurgitating a lot of the old stuff, but this new like creating derivative digital value products based on like the innate existing data infrastructure of what we've already kind of created with blockchain. Right? Like let's utilize blockchain in a whole new space. Right. And that's kind of like why we slapped an umbrella term to this digital matter theory, right? It's like a whole new human behavior, right? It's like let's leverage data to its maximum potential other than like, AI, large language models and stuff like that. Let's create new derivative products from data.
For sure.
Right now we can start with blockchain, but this can be applied in a much broader spectrum.
Yeah, and there's a new thing, and we'll shut up about DMT after this, but the unintended consequence of this angle is that BRC20s, runes, and all these like fungible standards, they don't account for an inflationary supply, like none of them, right? And so with this this pattern recognition, this pattern could occur every single 10 minutes, and so you have a methodology to expand the supply. We go back to what happened with Azuki. They tried to quote unquote expand the supply, and everybody hated it, right?
Yeah.
And so through this non-arbitrary, expansionary supply, you'll always have new tokens, a new onboarding mechanism for future community members, and those community members who decide to adopt this this token, they know that there's a probability that the token is going to increase based on every single 10 minutes. And so now I think you just have more as a developer, you have more room to like kind of design something with. So it's something that we've kind of been toying around. We have like this. I guess a Git book sort of like pending on release, just to have everybody kind of come up with their own like tokens based on like these pattern recognitions and stuff. But it's definitely a pain when trying to figure out like the best fungible standard to kind of like, do the first token with. But yeah, I mean, this is like, just a timing thing with like so many standards.
100%.
Yeah. So we talked about Track and we talked about Casey. You mentioned earlier about quadrillion art. Do you want to go into detail about what that is and like what you're doing with this project?
Totally. Yeah. So Quadrillion is really building its first product called Perpetuals, and with its volume 1 beginnings, it's a curated collection of 21 artists. Really 21 established artists really making their debut on ETH. And it'll be varying edition sizes, a really unique minting experience that we built from the ground up. And I think we're very excited with how these artists have taken to, building on Bitcoin, launching, with us for the first time. And then, of course, the relationship with OXBT, which will be that OXBT holders get priority access to this sort of curated collection. And so that's ultimately what Quadrillion is, at least for now, and its first product with Perpetuals. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Have you announced the 21 artists yet?
No. So with this sort of unique minting experience, we won't be actually announcing who the artists are until post-mint. And the reason for that is we wanted it to be a high focus on the art, not the artist, right? Gotcha. And so what we're trying to do, right, is really allow you to, with these reveals, to really connect, right, with the art as well as hopefully the artist behind it, without knowing their name, right? And so what you see with every single reveal is not only the art piece, but also an audio piece, right? Talking about the sort of the process behind doing it, or we gave them total creative freedom on the audio side. I believe that coming in the future we'll see like a song and a bunch of other sort of things that connect to this piece. But out of those 21 artists, we will have revealed at least 3 of the 21 by the time we get to mint, which should be sometime in early November, and full mint details should be coming soon. But the 3 artists there will be 3 out of the 21 artists that will be revealed at least.
Okay.
And of course from there, the rest of those, what we'd like you to do is of course connect, but also sort of see if you can figure out who those artists is, right, or who those artists are, right, and try and see if you can sleuth and go to ETH and other sort of things and find who those artists are and sort of get excited about these people, of course, launching for the first time on Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's cool.
And one of the ones we already released on a space on Friday was Terrell Jones, who's an amazing artist on ETH. And coming up on the second one we'll release out of the 3 is this Thursday on a Twitter space with that gentleman.
Right on. Hey, so I guess that's pretty interesting because you're hardcore, I guess, involved. So you're trying to, because we've seen like the discussions and the attempts of getting, Beeple and artists like this, like ginormous like the biggest artists who kind of like catalyze a lot of the mania from the last cycle, interested in digital artifacts and Bitcoin. And so how has the reaction been, like, internally in these dialogues you've been having with these artists? Like, are they is there a lot of friction? Is like, nah man, NFTs
they're dead,
or like what's their initial reaction to, like, this pitch?
So a couple of things, right? So one is like, we definitely tried to go for the Beeples, the X copies, right? Those guys. I think where they're sort of at, right, is of course in their careers, they now have, I think, some pretty high minimums or sort of guarantees that they need in order for them to even consider it, and usually that's in the high 5 to low 6 figures. And we have sort of $0, right? So, I think that we tried and could not. But I think that the lineup we did secure and confirm, I think is the absolute best we could do, right, with close to zero resources. And so I think to your question, right, of how was the conversations, I actually thought it was very smooth. I think that like, the pitch was really this, right? If you look at different sort of blockchains as canvases, we just believe, of course, Bitcoin to be the sort of best canvas for you to create on, right? The most resilient database, the sort of most immutable, right? Uncensorable, all of that sort of stuff. We believe it to be, the best canvas that you should be creating on in the long term, right? Continue to do your stuff on ETH. I think that it's ETH is not going to go anywhere, probably in the short term. And so that was ultimately the pitch, and people were like, yeah, I'm very interested. So we I think we're actually surprised by that reaction as well. I think that when we started this sort of BD for this months ago, we thought that there'd be a lot of pushback, but many of these artists were very open, wanted to learn about Ordinals. And I think as a part of this whole experience as well, we sort of threw all of our artists into one Discord server, almost like sort of like summer camp or band camp, and allowed them to interact with of course each other, as well as learn about Ordinals, right? So we've onboarded all of them to Ordinals, and we're hoping that many of their communities and collectors also are also involved in the mint as well. And I think like the OXP team mint, like hopefully some sort of signal to people that you should be coming over here, right? Like you should be interacting with Bitcoin and setting up a wallet and all of these sort of like basic things. So but I thought that's a great question.
Yeah, that's important because I don't think anybody should expect like Beeple to be like a what is it, a swoosh, nothing but net, like off the rip. These guys, I mean, they're gonna need to see something.
Yeah, some substance before they jump in.
Correct. Yeah,
totally.
And so it's gonna take projects like this, like a lot more of like an organic momentum building movement in the art space in order to kind of like gravitate these these bigger names into the space. But totally. I totally agree.
No, I completely agree with you. I think they need that signal, right? And like these larger artists, I think are sometimes some of the last ones to jump, and that's totally fine. Right? I think like you get to a certain point in your career where like you should be taking more measured jumps, right, rather than just sort of jumping at any opportunity. But I think like again, like I think the lineup that we secured and have is killer, and I think that we did the absolute best that we could, and I think that's all we can really do. And I think the sort of volumes or like sales that these artists have done right on ETH is like somewhere in the range of like $10 to $20 million collectively. So it's definitely not sort of like X copy or Beeple, but it's like I think that all of these artists are so incredibly talented and deserve the absolute best as well.
Did you have to explain the difference between an ordinal and an NFT to convince them, or?
Yeah, we did, and I think to that point it was actually kind of interesting. Some of these artists like actually assumed that their art was on chain on ETH, right? Like they didn't know that like they didn't know what an IPFS pointer link was. Like they didn't know any of that stuff, and I think it's understandable, right? Because I think as an artist, right, as a creator, you probably are worried less about that sort of stuff than you are about just creating, right? Or just being as creative as possible. Like you just want the thing to work. You just want to be able to sell your work, and not so much worried about the tech. And so like, we definitely had to explain it, as well as it was sort of eye opening, I think, for some more than others, that their art wasn't fully on chain and could have, and could go away, unfortunately, in the future if on ETH.
Yeah, that's true. I'm assuming that most people just assumed that it was on chain.
I think most people don't know, actually. I don't know.
No, I think most people don't, right? I think like people just go to OpenSea, right? They go to Blur, and they're like, yeah, this is on ETH. It must be, it must be immutable. It must not ever change, right? And it's of course just not the case, or not the truth.
Yeah, I wonder, because to us, obviously, the whole digital artifact narrative it's a strong one to us, right? But we're like hardcore
techs,
Web3 heads, and I guess techies. We're not like normal consumers, I guess I would say, like, but I think that is who we are kind of like, targeting at some point, like in the future, where we're expecting them to kind of like come in and gravitate and be reinvigorated into this space and all the, the products that we can offer as an industry or collective, whatever it is, right, as a community. But I'm wondering if this digital artifact, will this be like the main attraction point for them, or is it going to be again like something the newness factor, like, okay, we have these this digital art, these digital collectibles, they're truly on chain, but they have these derivative mix-ups of rare sats are embedded into them or imbued into them. Is that going to be like the main selling point, you think? I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts as far as like how do you?
I think again to the pitch, right, of what we really pitch to these artists is obviously not only the product and the experience, but like why you should be doing this over Tezos or some of the other maybe options that they've been working with in the past, is I think that like we believe if you look at sort of blockchains as ultimately a canvas to create on, we believe Bitcoin to be the best canvas. I think as an artist, right, you as a creator, you do probably care about the canvas you create on, right? You do really care about that. And so I think that the digital artifact narrative is absolutely one of the best selling points. I will say though, I guess actually I'm just remembering this now, but I will say that there was a little bit of worriness around, of course, one of the features of a digital artifact, right, is royalties cannot be enforced, right? If it is enforced, it's no longer a digital artifact. And of course, with these artists, they're still used to, royalties on the ETH side. And I completely understand that. And of course, on Bitcoin, we've started at 0 royalties. So that was the only piece that I think was a little bit difficult for some of these artists. Like, well, shit, I mean, it's really just sort of the primary sale. And then I'm not sure, sort of what I can do after. Now, I know Gamma does support royalties. And so there is that at least, but still, right, it's nothing in comparison to the ETH side, right? And so that was the only thing actually that I'm now sort of recalling many of those conversations that was like a bit of a worry. But I think fortunately, just a lot of these artists were very open-minded and ready. Cannot be more happy about that.
Yeah, even on the Ethereum side, there's like royalties aren't really enforced, really. So it's like it's all front end stuff, like in the same way that it's going to be on the front end for Ordinals. No,
100%. I think at least still on the ETH side, the artist side, there is just still some. It's not enforced, that's for sure, but there is some social consensus around like, all right, if you're buying more fine art, then pay your fair share of royalties. So it is just a little bit different.
So you mentioned perpetuals. Do you want to explain how you're working with them and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that and when you say that in that question, like how we're working with these artists or
yeah, correct.
Sort of, yeah, I mean the I guess the relationship is really like, we're providing the platform, doing the marketing, the outreach, the BD for collectors. basically sort of everything, right? Because their names are not going to be mentioned, of course, until postmint, and so not much, sort of lift, I think, on once they've of course finished their piece that they have to do. It's been a full experience, like we're inscribing it, right, and then of course on mint day, inscribing that as well. So the artist really in the relationship was, hey, this is your Genesis piece, right? This is the theme, which is beginnings, right? It's the beginnings of their pieces here. It's beginnings of honestly, like Quadrillion as a company, right? Just a whole host of things. Show us that in your work, but you have full creative, sort of freedom over that. And so you're seeing that, I think, in the pieces, right? Like I think we've now revealed, I think, 8 or 9 pieces so far, right? And they're all so dramatically different. Of course, they all have their own styles, but represent something totally different to each of them. And so that is that. And then I think really lastly, like the relationship as well, is we're planning an IRL event as well to sort of close out this full experience in LA, plan for sort of post mint. So that is the really the relationship.
Okay. So I'm assuming these artists, they're probably submitting like 4K content and like all this like high res stuff. So do you have to like, are you breaking this content down into pieces and like and doing recursive inscriptions, or do they do it, or like how does that work?
Yeah. So I mean, the majority of them, right, have crazy file sizes, and of course that has been one of the problems or sort of hurdles, right? Is file size for really all of them. So what we're doing is, all of them have their high res images that they've submitted. And then some of them were able to, through their own sort of compression methods, get it down to under 350 kilobytes. That was sort of the requirement, and others just couldn't. And so we have someone on the compression side that was helping us or was able to help us, get those file sizes down to under 350 kilobytes. And of course, what you'll see on chain is that under 350 kilobyte image. And I believe the plan for now on the marketplaces is to show the high res, right? But that is the current plan.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because these artists are not going to know the technical limitations of the chain themselves.
Yeah,
and that's why the industry has come up with ways to sort of compress things through recursive inscription or other methods. So, I guess one question for you, Bitgod, is Bitmap. What are your thoughts on Bitmap and like its potential to be utilized for like community building and like?
And I really want to kind of like also add in like because we were around in 2019, 2020 era where NFT art was first starting to kind of like the collector community was starting to kind of come together, right, around a I'm seeing a lot of parallels between what you're doing with your project and the early NFT art community. Building this organic collector interest of like digital collectibles, bringing these artists, making them, or inspiring them, motivating them, whatever, to put their talents on chain as closely as possible as they could on Ethereum, whatever. and a huge movement kind of spun up from that. And it was very slow in the beginning, very organic, right? And some people didn't see if this would even blow up or not, but obviously it took off to become one of the most, I guess, like valuable product showcases of Web3 of all time, right? So and along that time, like the metaverse space was kind of like in its infancy as well, but it became like a main like showcase space for a lot of these artists as well, like in Crypto Voxels, Decentraland, whatever. There was a lot of like art unveil events in these virtual environments. So I'm wondering if in relation to Bitmap, as far as like where is the virtual space on Bitcoin as of right now? This is like the only real existing virtual environment that any artist has any exposure to. So have you explored this kind of this parallel, like how you guys can kind of leverage what's happening with Bitmap and kind of like, bring more juice to this movement you're trying to create?
Yeah. So I think two of the people I know best really on that side of things are 8-Bit, right? And I'm so Chris, right? Who's building, I think, really Bitmap Valley. So I think both of them have been huge supporters of course of Bitmap. So Chris specifically, right? I'm definitely trying to support him as much as I can on the Bitmap Valley side, right? And so I know that he's getting closer to launch of that, and I'm looking forward to seeing how I can personally help, as well as the community, of course, that we have behind us. So I think that's my some of my thoughts to Bitmap is like I own a ton of Bitmaps. I think over 150. But I don't. I think other than that, and other than those sort of key connections, I don't have. I think don't have sort of like clear or maybe well thought out thoughts to how I can sort of help further the Bitmap community. So that's where I'm currently at with Bitmap, right? I think it's fortunately and unfortunately, right, have been a serious focus on the art side of things, and have been I think unfortunately less focused on many of the other meta protocols. But I would love to see how I can sort of help out more. Honestly,
Yeah, that makes
that's
sense.
where I'm at with it.
That makes sense. I mean, building the metaverse is like one of the more complex human initiatives, really. Just
Yeah,
because you look at any successful AAA game and you look at the budget it has, it's like over $100 million,
yeah,
and so it's pretty difficult to see how anyone can build the metaverse in any way, right, without having $100 million, right?
Mhm.
So,
yeah.
so yeah, I totally get it. I guess with your large community, Big Guy, what would you want to see from like a implementation of a metaverse that you could take advantage
Yeah,
of?
Mm.
Like, do you have any idea like what you'd prefer to see, like from a 3D
totally.
space?
I think my answer is I think pretty simple. Like I think it just needs to be fun, right? I think that
Mhm.
too often, what I've been seeing on gaming, and I think that this spills over into the metaverse as a niche as well, is like there's like too much focus first on the assets, or sort of like the asset value, and not enough focus on like just making the game or sort of making the experience fun first.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's what I'm ultimately looking for, and I would argue that the community would have somewhat of the same sentiment. I'm sure some of the community would be like, yeah, I would like it to be fun, but also it needs to make me money. I think
Yeah.
like that's a sort of side effect. I think it's just with Bitmap Valley, what I've seen I'm so Chris do, like that seems fun to me, right? It seems like something I would want to sit down and play with for an hour or so, if it was simple to get into, right? And there was I had friends that were into it as well. Like that's what I think is best, like is making that experience as fun as possible. And then like the whole secondary side of things, the whole I think money can come second.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say in response to that question.
Yeah, it's difficult because when it comes to like land ownership, you
Mhm.
spend so much money on land. Well, specifically for Bitmap, it wasn't very expensive, but once you own land, you put money into it. You try to come up with ways to like monetize it in a way where you sort of get some sort of ROI from some sort of investment. And so our thesis is like the economics of the metaverse is like very, very important to its construction and its build out. But then again, we've seen a ton of games out there that are extremely fun. They don't look as Unreal Engine esque, but they have
Yeah.
like 65 million daily active users. Something like
Right.
Roblox.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't think it needs to be. I don't think it needs to be AAA quality, right? I think again, like some of the more fun games I've been having or playing are some of the stuff that's been inscribed, right? Like
yeah,
on Ord.io, and like that's definitely not AAA quality,
that's right.
right? It's like Pong again, right? It's like simple stuff that I used to play, as I was a bit younger. So yeah, I think that it doesn't need to be crazy budgets, Unreal Engine. I think it just needs to be fun, but
Yeah,
that's not an easy thing to do, right? I think I'm just saying like it needs to be fun.
right.
That's a hard thing to do, right? So, but that's what I'm ultimately looking for.
All right. What are your takeaways from Bitcoin Amsterdam that you just visited? Any major
Yeah,
takeaways?
One of my major takeaways was how much more probably open the European Bitcoin community is than probably the Western side of the world. Went to one party specifically, right? It was like the official Bitcoin Amsterdam, like Wales or VIP party, and I actually didn't see too many other Ordinals people there. I think they were at another party mainly, but the majority of people there were Maxis, right? I think people that had never touched Ordinals or might never touch Ordinals. And my goal there was to try and Ordinal pill, right, as many people as possible. And, I had about 25% of people say like, I'm a Maxi, I'll never touch it. 25% would be like, yeah, I'm a Maxi, but maybe I'll sort of buy my first Ordinal in the next 6 months. And the other 50% were like, yeah, I think it's really interesting. I would love to check it out and like learn more. So I think that like, having that 50% or more people that I really chatted with, be interested in Ordinals, they've heard about it, they don't know where to get started, is I think the starting point, right? Like I think too often people are trying to go for like the mass or the normies or like, no, like we have a lot of people right in front of us, like Bitcoin maxis that are already in Bitcoin that would love to learn about this stuff and just don't know where to get started. And so like trying to figure out like how to get in front of those people has been a sort of challenge of mine. I've been on more sort of like Bitcoin maxi spaces, I think, in the past couple of days or since I got back from Bitcoin Amsterdam. But that was one of my biggest takeaways is I think just like most of the people that were there at that specific party and just at the conference in general were definitely more European or maybe on the Asian side of the world rather than the Western side of the world. And they're much more open, right? I think whereas I went to Bitcoin Miami and there are people like, fuck Ordinals, right? And like yeah. I'll it's much more brazen, I guess. Maybe many more keyboard warriors on the US side. So it was really interesting to see, and that was one of my takeaways though. And the Ordinals community is incredibly strong too. So it was great to get closer with them.
What do the Bitcoin maxis say about I guess the mining reward being halved into zero in 120 years from now? How do they see it being sustainable for the miners to keep the lights on?
I don't think they think about that too much, right? I think that they're just like, this is graffiti, this is it's shitcoinery, right? It's nonsense. Get it off. But this has been my thesis, right? Is like to your specific question and sort of the point I think that you're implying, right? Is the miners, I think, care about this stuff, right? And maybe some of those miners are Bitcoin maxis. But I do think that the miners will ultimately choose, of course, what is there to feed their families, not Bitcoin maxi ideals, right? And maybe that's Ordinals, maybe that's something else, right? Maybe it's RGB. I don't know, but I think that that's my thesis on sort of the answer to your question there. Is I think I just hear in these spaces like, it's nonsense. It shouldn't happen. Blah blah blah. I do see like a little bit of shifting though, right? Like from Bitcoin Magazine, I think you guys have maybe seen the what was it, Project Spartacus, right? Which is trying to, I believe, put many of the Assange files right on chain and on Ordinals.
Okay.
And they're in these spaces I've been on since getting back from Amsterdam. Many of them seem to really like that. Now I don't know if they would collect it, right? If they're going to use their Bitcoin to collect that stuff, if that even is a possibility. But they have said on these spaces like, hey, I actually really like that as an initiative. So that I think again is like just a small step, right? Like these little small steps to ultimately getting people more and more into or okay with, hey, like Ordinals could actually be a good thing. It's not all just shitcoinery, right? So small steps.
There's so many use cases where if you want something to be immutable, whether it's like an Assange file or a picture, it's the best place to do it is on Bitcoin. Like it's pretty reasonable. Yeah. So
totally.
All right, Bitgod. I think that's our time here. Really appreciate you for joining us. Any last takeaways from your side that you want our community to kind of look at or anything?
No, I think to sort of close out, I think best if of course you're really interested in art or maybe you're not in art but are really interested to learn more. I think just follow along with the whole reveal experience with at Quadrillion. That happens, or will be happening over the next couple of weeks every day at 2:10 p.m. PST. Just check out the images. There's a ton of detail in all of them, as well as listen to the audio and just follow along. And if you connect with a couple pieces, then hopefully you want to you want to take part in the mint. And I think the details will be out on that soon. And also just say, like, appreciate you guys, of course, for having me on, and hopefully anyone from, I guess, our community or my community, as well as others, make sure to give you guys a follow and continue to push your podcast forward.
Yeah, appreciate that, Bitgod, and we're excited to see what the art from Quadrillion, and we're going to be following closely.
Yeah.
Now that art is forever on chain, like, we're definitely way more interested than we were in Ethereum land. So
yeah, and it's definitely going to be important to see how your your brand and what it is your community represents kind of evolves moving forward, because like we established earlier in the conversation, there's a lot of it feels like we're in a lull, but not really. I guess like technical lull, but culturally and like I guess like that gut instinct we all have. Like I don't feel like it's deterred in any way. It's just more of like, we have to kind of like sit around and wait for the giga brains to figure out how do we actually build the real value moving forward. But people like you and the communities you people like yourselves can generate around that. That is what's going to drive this space forward, right? Because I mean, influence is very powerful. Something we've kind of like learned over time. We didn't really appreciate as much like in the beginning days, we didn't understand the power of social media, but you've definitely unlocked that
for sure
masterfully. And we definitely applaud you and everything you're doing as far as like leveraging that for like, the good of this movement. Right. So
totally.
Kudos to you and your community. And man, we're excited to see what you do in the future. Hopefully we have you back on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Totally. Right. No, and I appreciate, of course, you guys having me, and looking forward to being back soon, hopefully.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, man. And we will be in touch on Twitter, and looking forward to this release, man. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you.